It says we start in the.
Singing is on.
It worked. All right.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's getting sick in Connecticut, so I got the plague mask. I don't want to get sick right now. It's really cold out here, so also
Yeah, guys. It's really cold in Russia, but I don't know why my live stream is offline yet. Maybe it's just a little bit of a delay.
good
Let's wait.
question.
It says we're live, but I don't know.
Let me go look and see on your page. That's a great way to find out, eh? Over here. Move my keyboard over
Yeah,
there.
we
I've got
just
two screens. It's confusing me.
yeah, it says we're live. Yes, it just has like a little delay.
Cool. So how's everybody
Okay.
doing? Let's get on. I'm gonna go open your page just so we can read any messages that people are saying.
Yeah,
right now.
I can read them, and I can see chat here in my panel.
Sweet.
So yeah, people, if you wanna ask some questions, me or Andres will be ready to answer right back. Yeah, we wanted to discuss one thing, and I called Andreas today and said that I have a little idea what we should do, because I've seen you do a lot of stuff on Greta and stuff like this, and it all sounds for me it looks like you are trying to reveal the script that she's bringing into this political I don't know, swamp. Yeah. how
Yeah,
should we
I mean, you
call
got to be real careful with like modern issues. I think the thing about Greta, aside from the fact that she looks like an actual character from Skyrim, is that she's a kid who has a lot of feelings that are probably legitimate. I mean, I remember as a kid feeling a lot of the same way. Like I know more than other people. Like people know less than me. Like I think it's so simple to solve problems. Like I don't understand the complexities of problems. There's a lot of things about her that make her a hero for a lot of people. A lot of my friends like her. I think she's not horrible. I prefer Soph,
But
but
is it confirmed that she was actually depicted by Simpsons, right?
well, so that, and then of course everything's depicted by Simpsons. So I mean, like that's an interesting concept. Is that she came out and she did exactly the same framing, the way they shot it, what made it look like The Simpsons. So what I think it is that she doesn't have as much control over her environment as a 16-year-old girl would want, right? Like
Yeah.
anybody in the world, and she's not aware of that necessarily, but she's pushing as hard as she can towards her goal. It's just that around her are people that have lots and lots of money and are riding on her publicity bubble because they've seen this before. This is not the first time a kid has been used as the patsy for a thing. So I don't hate her, and I think a lot of people, they want to make like really mean comments about these kids, but it's like, dude, I totally feel for anybody that's trying. It's just that a lot of the time we need to see how our consequences there's a risk assessment with consequences. And I don't know if she understands so much about, I mean, she sees the solution. I don't think she fully sees the problem. And I think that she doesn't understand that the people that she's going to want there to be a problem. Like she's going to the people that are in charge so that she can have them fix the problems. I don't think she fully understands why the problems exist then,
Yeah. It's
But
not.
I like that you want to do news.
Yeah, it's not like I'm trying to attack her or something. I mean,
Right.
I like your activity about you get into stuff, you like your investigation type of mind is welcome, and that's why I proposed you to make this script busting.
Yeah, script busting is a really great title. I like your title. I think that's something that no one is really doing right now because everyone has a very biased look at the media, and they, it's either they hate what's going on or they love what's going on, or I think that's very blinded. We need to be able to just talk about what we see, whether or not it's what's going on, even just what we're seeing on the internet. Is becoming something that should be communicated about. And yeah, it's like you and me and a lot of people are seeing that this is repeating patterns from media, especially like they're setting it up to do that. So, there's a script, there's some sort of a narrative. And we know that because that's how media works. You have a publicity stunt. If you've seen that movie, by the Shaun of the Dead guy, How to Lose Friends and Alienate Yourself. There's one of the main characters' jobs is just to have celebrities do things so that they're seen doing them by paparazzi. I mean, so it translates very well into crises and different sorts of events happening, but not just violent ones, like straight up speeches and media sensations and hysterias, social hysterias are there's a script, and it seems like they're making it clear of that.
Yeah, I like the idea of Simpsons and projection as a like like a little prophecy projection. I don't know how do you call it, because
Yeah.
what they show in like on some certain angles, like they show in the parts of some words. So you like have like you can read it either way. Like you can read like Notre Game or Notre Dame, right? But when you see the guy is falling and he's looking at the fire, it all makes sense only in 2019, right?
Right.
But when you watch the series in back into I don't know 1990 something, right? You wouldn't think about any any thoughts like this, right? Because it's you didn't have information at that certain period, right?
Right. And then you remember from like Terminator, there will be like, this is when this happens. And then the next movie, because they canceled the event, it's postponed and it happens anyway. So I think this is a big thing with Nostradamus and with The Simpsons. The Simpsons has the way The Simpsons is done. I have some friends who've met Simpsons writers. Luckily, I've avoided some of the weirder people involved, but there are a lot of them are geniuses. Like almost all of them are Yale graduates, like Conan O'Brien and things like that. There's all these waspy 180 IQs, people that are involved with it. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, which is interesting because the show's not always funny and it's often very preachy, but there's so much content. So what they do is everyone's egged on to write the craziest thing or the most provocative things. And if they decide they're not going to use the episode, they shelve it. Like Prince did with his music. They put it in a big archive. And there are thousands, supposedly, at least 1,000, probably more episodes done of The Simpsons you will never see, or maybe someday. Because if they ever have a point where one of those episodes gets shelved again, then they pull out one of the oldest episodes, which over a period of time has become more socially acceptable. So it's no longer as crazy it was in the mid 2000s or whatever. It's actually, now that the South Park and American Dad and everything else has pushed things past it, you can say things you couldn't have said at that time. So they just save the episode and use it later. And so that explains a lot of things about The Simpsons, how they are able to tie moments to new moments and how they're able to see things. And they have all of these people that studied the Iliad, and they went to philosophy classes and studied Hellenistic philosophy before they started making cartoons, right? And that's also why all the stories are tied together in non-causality, but they're causal because each one of them is a different story. But Nostradamus is also known for doing like something that's a reflection. So he's saying this is a city this is going to happen. But we talk about the Berenstain thing. Like if there was a shift, then maybe Nostradamus is making a sort of a prediction that can work in multiple scenarios. And that also, I think, The Simpsons is set up. They've set up these scripts that this can happen and it will allude to something, and then other people can see it and they can remark about it. That's one of the things I prefer about South Park, because South Park right now is they're releasing their 23rd season. They just got renewed for 2 or 3 more, and what they're doing is kind of Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So the way The Simpsons works is they'll do a esoteric thing, like you said, and then eventually it'll come out what it was about. You're like, oh, that's what The Simpsons was about, but it's like veiled, and you don't get it until afterwards, which is like, it's nice because you don't have the shock value. You have so much shock you don't understand it, but then it's comfortable because you had the shock of the event. With Simpsons, the event is hypothetical, but it's coming. So it's in game theory, and they're like, this is the scenario. This could happen in South Park, and then it becomes more and more crazy until eventually all the scenarios played out in your mind, and it's a kind of meditation. So it helps people to wrestle with concepts. It's one of the reasons why South Park was so useful in shifting society's paradigm so quickly, because it was like, let's say this did happen. What would we do? What would they do? How would it work out? That's why Simpsons doesn't do that, because Simpsons is trying to say, oh, well, I don't understand this. And then, oh, wow, maybe that's what it was about. So in the most recent couple episodes of the South Park, Winnie the Pooh is in jail in China. And what ended up happening because of that was China banned South Park, and the NBA was forced into this conundrum where they have to ascribe to Chinese politics. And basically the whole world was turned on its head over a South Park episode, which hasn't happened in a while. South Park does this a lot. It's historic, but it's been a while since it hit. I mean, maybe it hits the Midwest, maybe it hits New York, maybe it hits California. No, this hit the whole world and hit China. And China is very, in the middle of these Hong Kong protests. And if anyone in China hears about them and sees that they have the opportunity to have sovereignty and independence and autonomy, that would be very bad for the PRC state. They would lose control. People would start breaking apart. It's inevitable that China has the same problems the United States had. And so South Park is showing that. And you've got, who's the Magic Johnson? No, I forget which one. Sorry. There's one of the basketball stars, LeBron James. Somebody came out.
Rodman.
Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman came out in support of PRC and against the Chinese Hong Kong protests, saying that they shouldn't protest.
I don't know. No. I mean, he went to North Korea, and he was like ambassador from undercover ambassador for many years. He was like participating very, very well there. But what I was trying to say is that I'm familiar with the video production, and we like making about 300 videos per year, or maybe even more. And I was once working for some political online magazine, and we were also producing like 4 videos per day. And one of them was the video that was like from the topic book. And of course, all the videos were from the topic book, but one is like the main topic of the day. And you like do it for 3 days, and you kind of predicting what's going to happen in 3 days. So it's like, and it always happened as we predicted, because, nobody knew we were spending 3 days to do it. But when we were ready, the occasion was online. And it was like very interesting. How did they know and send us this topic book? The topic book, when they exactly tell you what to write or what not to write about certain event. And this is how it goes when you have large teams with these big numbers of episodes. You just cannot make them up. Like you just, it's very impossible, because you have like chief editor who knows what topics you're supposed to work on. And they like give you some type of frames or, red lines where you cannot just go. And they say like, you should supposed to write about like, I don't know, the elections of president, and you write about that. But the topic book also sends you the message what you can mention or what you cannot mention. So, and this is how your imagination is like integrated in the topic. And this is how it works in the big teams. Put on the mic.
Sorry, I was gonna say that's also the reactions. I was just thinking, like the reactions that people are triggered. Is South Park gets you to understand how you would handle a situation, but The Simpsons would have you triggered. So like, if this happens, you know what to think, you know what to feel, because you felt that way during this trigger moment where you've never had that scenario before. It was so surprising that South Park or Simpsons had this scenario, and then now you know how to react. And it's exactly the same training you had as a kid to think that words meant crazy, or that you shouldn't question things, because if you question them, it's the same as believing in cow abductions from space. I mean, like all of it's built into your trigger mechanism. So I mean, that's I think a huge part of how these scripts work.
Yeah, and you're also familiar with SEO, and also you use SEO text in, and you know how the script is supposed to, be read well by the robot, so you can get some, great results in your search engine ranking, right?
Sometimes, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like they also have people they pay, I know
Yeah.
that like pick you, and then they watch like maybe 100 people. I don't know, and I mean, it's not hard to assign a person with the kind of money they have to just have a fishing bucket, and it's like you put all the people you're watching in one lake, and it's in one bucket for yourself. So there's people in all over the world, but there's probably like thousands of people that specifically are watching specific channels, and not just channels, websites, IP addresses, people, because with the kind of information that Facebook and Google have collected, I mean, these companies have bought other companies that collect data. There are companies that collected data in the 80s and 70s. They would get your phone number, they would get your bank address, whatever. They buy companies that buy the records from Blockbuster Video. So they know all the videotapes that your parents used to rent in the 90s. You know what I mean? They know so much more about what shaped you than you even realize because they've been looking at it more clearly. So
What about the 1984 book by Orwell, right? Where he was like, also it's also can be a script, some certain script.
yeah, well, I remember. Okay, so when I first read 1984, The Power was out, so I went to the like bookstore, which was like the last month of the bookstore before it was like bankrupted and shut down and replaced with digital everything. So I remember it was a very important moment because it was raining and it doesn't rain all the time. It was like a flood and the power was out everywhere. But later on, like a year or two later, maybe no, it was probably a little bit later than that. But whenever it became a digital edition, was the start. I think Kindles were just starting. The beginning thing was Animal Farm and 1984 had lost their publication rights, so they pulled the books out of people's Kindles. So it was like the most telling thing to see. It was like, they can give and take away. In 1984, obviously George Orwell, Eric Blair was his real name, Tony Blair's sixth cousin or something like that. So you start looking into these British royal people. He was a pararoyal. He lived, his father was a general. He was born in India, but back then India was a state in Britain, essentially, like Pakistan became, right? So
Pakistan was India, in fact. It was
you get the feeling that they had a contingency. They didn't trust the Hindus as much as the Muslims to be aligned in legion. So there is a closer relationship today between Pakistan and modern England. But India itself is still,
Yeah, because the Pakistan was used to control India in this question, and that's why Pakistan have a green card in UK, right? So
yeah, and it's a crazy fight because there are Muslims in India, there are Hindus in Pakistan. The fight clearly isn't about that. So
of course,
yet they both have nukes aimed at each other. I mean, supposedly. So that makes you have to wonder about what power play is going on in Kashmir between the British and everybody else.
It's just to keep the fire burning, and it's easier to control, it's easier to trade, it's easier to steal organs and stuff like this, steal people, steal money, contra, how do you call it, money laundering, money trafficking and stuff like this. So illegal trafficking of drugs and stuff. India is a huge place, it's like 1 billion people there. So it's might as well just just imagine if they were united like Pakistan and India, how much how big economy would be. It would be probably the first one.
It would be dangerous. Yeah, it would be dangerous for. I mean, it will be someday. It will be dangerous for other powers, which is why they divide and conquer.
Yeah, China also hates India, and they India is poking China. China is poking India, but.
Well, China's a really interesting thing too, right? I mean, I would refer to the Chinas at this point because there's Taiwan, which is the true China.
Oh, okay. I wanted to talk about Taiwan because what I heard and what the script tells me as the one who's probably aware of some political issues So the script tells me that I see Taiwan coming back to China very soon. I mean, like a couple of years. So it's like a question just of the Trump's turn. So if
Yeah.
Trump's go on second term, he's probably make Taiwan go back to China, and for
You
sure
think he's going to do that? You think he's going to help Taiwan get
he he
eaten?
he already I think
Eaten with wolves?
he already promised that to Xi to sign the deal
Brutal.
because they
What I see happening is, okay, so right before this election, the last election, it was pretty inevitable that we were going to have conflicts. There was going to be a worldwide contingency operations and probably some sort of conflicts that led to full out publicly addressed and admitted war. And you have to admit war differently when you have war because there are lots of rules to war, right? So you can't do certain things anymore. We've had all these treaties because we're midst war. We're in the middle of World War II still in a lot of ways. We haven't completely ended that, but there's all these rules. So what we say is, well, this is a demilitarized moment, but we're still having contingency operations. When we ended the war in Iraq, we began contingency operations. So what I see happening is an extension of that. It seemed inevitable that we would have hit some sort of a war. You know, the Secretary General almost becoming president led to, you know, a lot of people thought that Clinton was going to Iran, that there was going to be, you know, extreme amounts of war with China. I don't see that over. I see that's just postponed. And now it's the whole world's thinking about it. If it was just a surprise, it would have been weird, but everyone's upset. And the thing is, there is disparity in Asia. Like Hong Kong is not, it's not perfect. Like it's got more freedom than stability. There's so much wealth and so much poverty. There's so much more poverty than there is wealth. And then you look at China, and China's rather, you know, fascistic, but at the same time, there's they've made poverty illegal. They banned it. It's just not allowed, you know, not really. And they've banned wealth beyond a certain sort of wealth as well. So there's some interest to their plight. And I know that Taiwan itself, like, there are lots of people in Taiwan that would be willing to become part of mainland China. However, most are not. And I think this conflict will decide whether or not that happens, because if Taiwan and Hong Kong are able to work with another power together, like if they're able to work with Japan and the United States, then yeah, they could easily stop China. I mean, easily is not the word, but it would make China look so bad that it would really not. It would, you know, China would be embarrassed in a lot of ways. There would be violence, there would be death, there would be, you know, China would try, but it would look so bad that they were just trying to murder these people that, yeah, it would become the, you know, an all-out conflict involving most major states. So
China, everybody underestimated China for a very long period, but in fact, China was playing, and he was playing undercover, and all the emperors didn't just disappear, like we used to be, said like last emperor of China like disappeared in the 20s of last century, but that's not true. They're still somehow some way they're like in Singapore, they're in Malaysia, they're like in Australia, in New Zealand. They're like, everything is bought by China in New Zealand, everything is bought
right.
by China in Africa, everything is bought by China in Russia.
Right,
They
but I
like,
think this is part of a plan also, is to repossess everything that they own, right? Because what you do is you use all of that wealth, all of that work, and guess how many times farmers have lost the farm? I mean, every time, right? Like Americans and Czechs and Chechens, we all remember our farms being lost. Like everyone remembers that. So when China gets their farm taken from them by the banks, which could be like a real thing. If there's a mass bankruptcy, that will also lead to a conflict. That's one of the reasons why China's working so hard to build up their home as well. But China's shifting into a power state, and then the colonies are becoming their new sweatshop labor spots. Vietnam and Africa are becoming those sorts of places.
do you know what they are promoting actually? What the idea of China? Do you know their ideology? What the script of China?
I mean, it seems like it's singularity.
No,
They,
no,
they,
no. They want to return Great Tartaria. In fact, they want to return that order that was before because they like talking about it right now. So they like saying, Russia is like the um, so they lead like a territory of Russia. There's another one is like Persia, is like Iran and Iraq and Syria, all together, and the other one is China. So like three united counties that they're supposed to make this, new union of people's prosperity. They want to call it Union of People's Prosperity, and everybody around supposed to have all this infrastructure. They're gonna build all those roads, all those railways, channels, water supplies, electric grids, and like they spending all this money that they have for
Mhm.
this. And this is their ideology. They promoting this stuff, and they're saying like, U.S. doesn't want to be globalist leader. We're gonna be the globalist leader, and everybody's betting on them right now. Like banksters betting on them, globalists, all the globalists, completely betting on them, and everybody else. Great Britain betting on China. Australia is betting on China. Canada's betting on China. Everybody else except Trump. And Trump was like, playing a game, trying to,
Make a deal.
save some time for his new term. But he doesn't have anything to propose China except Taiwan because he can't give up anymore, nothing else. Formosa is the only place that he can say like, we are not supposing Formosa, take it back like you did with Hong Kong, and that's what they're gonna do.
You don't think that there's going to be like a major sea like battle? Yeah, I kind of think that between Trump's interests in Japan and Japan's interest in Formosa, that there's enough out there in the islands that we could just return to the World War II South Pacific plan and just keep going. Like we could take back the South Pacific. And I think that that's actually something that they're scared of dealing with right now because they are trying to build the infrastructure. And it's not just China. Obviously, Putin's done amazing amounts of infrastructure. Like Russia looks really cool right now, to be
You know what
fair.
China does in this Pacific region? They just, building island by island each and
Right.
every month. And they're
Yeah.
like saying, we have this territorial waters around our islands and you cannot go there anymore. And Americans like step back, step back, step back until you like push to your islands. And
Yeah.
right now you looking from your islands on their islands because they have their islands built like 100 miles from your islands right now. So this is like ridiculous. Nobody's gonna fight China. You understand that? And they're like, totally aggressive with this. They like the last ones that they haven't conquered that is just Philippines. And Philippines totally turned around from US while Obama was screwing around there. You know that Philippine president like saying son of a bitch about Obama, like very interesting guy. So I mean, China took the Asia back, and they're like trying to build this all totalitarian style of state with
I mean, it's true, but look at what they're building. I mean, that state doesn't look very Chinese. Like they've got these clone buildings of France and of New York and of Russia. They've built these
yeah.
clone states, and there's these ghost towns. I mean, you think if there's 1.5 billion Chinese, how are they not filling up all of these ghost towns? There's some sort of a plan for not just Chinese people to live in China in the future. I get the feeling, which is
Yes, yes.
really interesting because
They
China has
welcome
been all about.
everybody. Everybody can come to China. I know one guy who was like also a YouTuber. His name is John Humanity. He went to China, working for China. He's from US. I mean, people go in there. So I mean, there's a bunch of huge companies hiring US citizens. I mean, this is Russians go to China. Everybody goes to China. China is like a new center of the world right now. Looks like.
Mhm. I mean, it's the old center too. That's the thing. So I think we'll find that the real thing is that it can happen. That the state can build these things. This is a better continuation of Marxism than what the Soviet Union was doing. Like the idea of post-capitalism resource state where they don't want to
Yeah.
make new phones every day all the time anymore. They get to a point where that's they close that chapter and they move on. That can be a thing. However, I think that the PRC is not the longest. They're not going to last. more and more, I think the PRC is going to dissipate because there's enough people that are so frustrated with it. Having said that, I'm kind of isolated from, like, if you're in Canada right now, I've known some of our people in the Tartary Nova Discord, right? They're talking in Canada about protests the Chinese are committing against the Hong Kong protesters because they're pro PRC, and there's such a push for PRC supremacy that I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but yeah, I mean, if it was just enough disclosure of information, then yeah, if that's all it takes is information to destroy something, then yeah, I think inevitably it's going to fall apart because it's hard to keep information from people. And at some point, like, China will not be able to keep the secret anymore. And yeah, they are expanding around, but that's why I say that eventually there will be some sort of a major conflict. I think that's what's interesting about the current debates. I still think that Trump is probably a term president, but Yang, and Tulsi are very interesting because Yang wants to automate geoengineering and Tulsi wants to weaponize Aloha, and bring love to Iraq and China. You know what I mean? Like, that's the next wave of militarization. And I think she understands it as someone from Hawaii better than a lot of people realize. So yeah, there's a lot of discrete agents involved with this coming conflict. But that's also what's so interesting about why South Park made these episodes about China recently, because it's like everyone in the world sees it coming,
Did they make anything about like a war or conflict with China or something?
There's a new episode I haven't seen. Last night's episode I really now wish I had, or it's Wednesdays, but there's a new one out. But what they've done is they've talked about they made some jokes about people that were going along with China. They've made jokes about the basketball, not willing to put their hand on their heart, but willing to bow to China. Right? They're moving towards a serious conflict in this series. I think this season, probably the 6th episode, will be a world conflict, it looks like. But meanwhile, there's also the marijuana issue in this show, which also is interesting because America is becoming more and more a vapor cloud, and that's not always a good thing. I mean, there's some positives to people not being on heroin all the time, but that's the issue, is that China's committing an opium war now with fentanyl, the way it was done to them. And this is so funny that it's happening all around the Hong Kong protesters, right? Like, it's just, everything is all scripted. Like, that's pretty clear. This is crazy that they're setting it up like that. The Americans are becoming addicted to these substances, which are getting them out of the way. And then the Chinese are being, forced to work harder and harder and harder. I mean, they've banished most of their drugs. The Chinese had crazy amount of drugs up until 2010. Basically, they had crazy amounts of drugs. They were towns that they were manufacturing drugs to sell around the world, and they were just all in drugs. And it makes sense. Like, how do you not sleep at night, not eat, work all day without a wife, and still be happy? Like, well, they figured out chemicals to do that. So, and this is something that I think is going to be really interesting in the next 20 years also, is the, like, Judge Dredd level of psychoactivity in the war. Because if you've seen the movie, Wells made a movie called the Things to Come. It's 1936 movie. It's like, let's just say in the next few years, like, that we have an all-out war, like a world war. It's like it is very clear that they knew it was coming because the British government made this film. And then they lead into, after the war, there's a super society that, instead of killing people, and they don't have LSD yet, but it's basically a vaporous psychedelic that they drug the populations, and then it's peace. So I see that as, also part of the script, that we're headed towards a time when they don't need to use bullets as much anymore because they've already terminated Sean Connery. They've gotten most people not to have kids. And then that's also kind of the interesting thing about that other, in terms of script busting. Like, They Live is an interesting movie because it shows you put on the glasses and you see through the propaganda. And so he sees a sign that says, go on vacation, but it really says, marry and reproduce. I mean, like, that They don't tell you to do that anymore. So it's interesting. We're living in a society that's more dystopian than they live. But at the same time, I think that might come back because there's a certain amount of keeping people together that reduces their goals and it keeps them satisfied enough that they're complacent. I think that's definitely coming. Is there going to be if they can get enough people to feel wiped out that they can go into a baby boom again, then they can really create. I mean, Americans are already feeling that way, right? There's so many people that are like, oh wow, there are more women in the Chinese army than there are people in the United States. Like, so
Yeah.
it's intimidating, and there's not even that many women proportionally in China. So it's like it's scary. And so Americans, I think, will start wanting to have more kids soon. And that's going to be a really interesting if there's a baby boom, because what happened last time we had a baby boom and the time before that, and probably several times before that, it looks like there's just major epic annihilations of male populations through useless conflicts that are, I mean, they could be avoided, but it's easier to like get all, I mean, think about World War II, all the men were gone. Not a lot of them came home. There were 3 women to every 1 man. You know, it was called the Kinder, Gentler Times by George Senior Bush. So there's some reason to it. Like there's a reason to have baby booms, but it's not what it sounds like.
Yeah. In fact, China is the only country that has like 400 million people officially in reserves of army service. So it's like 40 or 80 million people that are currently like working with the army. So it's like a civil supply distributions and logistics and all this stuff, which is also needed in a huge army operations. And they are the only country that can put one soldier in the visibility of another soldier and stretch this line through all the Asia. So it's like,
right. And you know, this is something that, like, if you look at maps, I mean, I'm still wrestling with this concept, but the nuclear zones that were fallout zones for major catastrophes did not fall upon Central America. It was one of the safest. One of my more recent videos on the Exertus channel, we talk about South American NIMSA. So what's happening now is Bolivia has brought in 1 million Russians and 1 million Chinese in exchange for jet planes and exchange for AK-47, like, you know, the new guns, whatever the new guns are. I think you guys have better ones than Kalashnikovs now, ones that shoot underwater, you know. But so the Chinese and the Russians after the Germans have already put 1 million people in Bolivia. So there's a really huge population of non-indigenous native Quechua Indians. You know, there's other people there, and they have jet planes and machine guns. So it's interesting. The future of Bolivia is one, I think, of conflict for the rest of the Western Hemisphere. And it's probably a place where we'll find, I mean, it's up in the mountains, it's discreet, but it's close to Venezuela and Brazil. And I mean, it's a spot where there will be more and more Chinese and more Russians. So that's going to be, in the next 5 years, something that you're going to be hearing about a lot more. And I wonder also, you know, what kind of precedent we'll find in media about it, because that it seems like everything that, you know, that always comes back to it is what we talk about. Somebody made a video about it already. Somebody made a cartoon for kids about it.
Yeah, we should ask our viewers if you guys have seen any movies or cartoons that had a predicted script way before then it happened. Just write us about it in the comments, both at my channel and Andrea's channel, and we're gonna be covering those events at the next chats. I think we're gonna have like a series of these script busting chats. So I hope you guys liked it today, and I like this anti-plaque mask that you have.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you've seen DuckTales and if you've seen my shows about DuckTales, then you know that I think there's quite a bit of stuff in the media all about the plague and about Tartaria and about the mud flood. And I think that's going to be interesting as we're leading this show into current events, because clearly they've been talking about history, but do you think that they've been talking about news too? I think they have. I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah. I'm a living witness that the news happened 3 days after we know it. So
Yeah.
so thanks a lot, guys, for joining us today, and see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good talking.